All right, and Zach's here too. That's great. Hey, did you guys have a good weekend and week?
My car broke down today.
Oh,
Oh,
that's awesome. That is great news.
Dude, I'm so lucky. So my timing belt snapped, but it snapped literally as I was pulling into my driveway.
oh
No
God.
way.
Yeah.
That is that is pretty cool. I remember my first marriage, we were driving north to Salt Lake. We were halfway there, middle of the highway, super, super busy. And I heard what sounded like a shotgun blast over my shoulder. And it was the driver's side tire completely exploded.
Oh my gosh.
And I was able, I don't know how, but I mean, I was in the middle lane going 70 plus miles an hour, cars on every side. It was just like Moses in the Red Sea. Everything parted, pulled over to the side. We were only sitting there for a couple of minutes when magically this red pickup truck came by. And I was raised with three Navajo brothers, and they weren't the same guys, but this truck was packed with several of my Navajo brothers right there, just pouring out and helped us right away. And it could not have been better timing because we did not even have time to panic or get upset or anything when these good guys just pulled up and helped us out. It was awesome.
I
Very
love that.
cool. Yeah,
That's a good
I
show of
love the
humanity.
miraculous timing. Well, this week we are going to be talking about, well, I should say something before we go on. I also teach at UVU, and what happened last week, I think, is absolutely horrible. Regardless of an individual's politics or anything like that, I think we should always feel safe to speak our piece on a university campus. I mean, universities are built around the premise to support and sustain critical thinking. And I am so grateful that the people that I know there were able to get off campus safely. My daughter, the children of several friends of mine were able to get off safely, faculty that I knew, and it was that part was nice. But I really hope that you guys understand and appreciate the fact that this campus is here to support you in whatever your voice is, and the people here, the university police, everybody will do whatever they can to make sure that you feel safe. And so I hope you guys get that message loud and clear. But this week, oh, wait a sec. I can't record it. Hold on just a sec. I forgot that, can everybody see the map on my page?
Yes.
Okay, I forgot that this program does not allow me to record image if I don't share a screenshot with you guys. So I want to do that. Oh, no, lost it. Okay, here we go. And it's back. Okay, I just want you guys to know that I support your perspective, your capacity to express yourself, and will do whatever I can to make sure you guys feel safe doing that. But this week we are shifting around again to the other side of the world, almost the far side of the world, not quite. We last week we talked about the Etruscans, the Greeks, and the Romans, and there was an awful lot of overlap with those three civilizations. But it's interesting to me that you look at that art, and I hope you guys kind of see too that it feels like there is a transition from Etruscans to Greeks to Romans. There is a transition from that kind of Egyptian slash Mesopotamian style to what we are a lot more comfortable with now, as we see as kind of the European classical style, with the Etruscans having that same kind of shape of eyes, and then get things looking more and more heavily influenced by naturalism as we get closer to the height of the Romans. Now we are going back in time to closer to these guys were they probably traded with the Mesopotamians. In fact, I'm pretty sure they did, because if you look at some of the imagery that we see, it'll seem very familiar. And to the point where I'm thinking that artists from India probably went to or exchanged with artists from the Mesopotamian area too. You know, that there was some sort of cultural exchange. And but it's really fascinating to me how different these guys are too. Now, I'm gonna find a map of India so I can show you guys where this is. We look right here. Can you guys all see this map?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we are looking at, so this is India, right around here. Okay. Mesopotamia, right around this area. Okay. Etruscans, right around here. You know, this kind of area. Greeks right through here. Romans off to the left a little bit, off the edge of the map. Okay. But we are looking at this area right where this about RJ is, right around through here. So Pakistan and northwestern India, essentially. And you can see these guys are dealing with some of the same areas that Mesopotamians are. You know, you got the Arabian Sea right through here. And I can see if these guys traded on the ocean, it is not that big of a stretch that they could go to the Gulf of Aden, go up, you know, the Reed Sea right through here and deal with Egypt. Egypt had at this time also, there's archaeological evidence showing that they had spice routes and trade routes that went from Egypt all the way through here, you know, Palmyra and Syria, all through Iran, Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, all the way up through northern India into China, and just, you know, right through here. So these people were definitely connected. And it's really nice and comforting to think that all these guys were completely independent, and they weren't. I'm There's oddities that show up every once in a while, but it's enough to suggest that there was trade in between these people. And, you know, if not trade of ideas, definitely some exchange of goods. Like we saw in Mesopotamia, we saw that they had lapis from Afghanistan, and they had coral from this area around the Arabian Sea. And, you know, this, we're talking about several hundred miles of travel.
In my I think reflection about the graveyard of were some items that were found from the Indus River like civilization, and also the I don't know how to pronounce it, but the one that's like Qin, if it's Quin or Chin.
Gene,
Chin.
yeah. Yeah, so it was definitely from this area, these areas then. That's what your whole thing was about. Yeah. I think that's incredibly cool. And stuff keeps showing up that lets us know that these people did interact somehow. Like for example, there's a maybe 20, 25 years ago, I want to say, there's a woman from the Forensic Institute of Munich who did a study on 2,000-year-old Egyptian mummies and found chemical chains that look like tobacco, which is really fascinating because tobacco only grows, you know, until it was forcibly relocated to other areas. There's only evidence of it ever growing in the Americas. And the officially, and you know, in all our history, trade between this part of the world and the Americas didn't really kick off until the 16th century. So how could tobacco and nicotine show up in Egyptian mummies 2,000 years old? And there's more and more evidence showing up. Like there's Chinese maps that are almost 1,000 years old that show the Sea of Cortez and Baja California. You know, and stuff like this happens all the time. Of the Chile, are there are ancient pots that look like they were inspired by Japanese Jomon culture, which is something else we'll touch on later. But I don't know. I think that there's a lot more interconnection that we give credit for. There's even a forensic geologist that I started following found that gold in Phoenician shipwrecks that is, over 2,000 years old was actually mined in the Great Lakes region, which, holy cow, that's incredibly cool. All right, so we should be back. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? That the map that shows Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna switch pages again. So this area right here, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwestern India is what we're looking at blown up. So that's that. Some of the things that are so fascinating about this culture is one, that the written history of India goes back. There's history that they claim that is thousands of years older than anybody else's cultural written history. The only other history that I know of that gives it a run for its money, ancient history wise, is the oral histories of indigenous Australians, where there are actually stories that have been carried down for generations about an astronomical event that happened 50,000 years ago, which I think blows the water out of everybody else's. But even with that being said, this civilization that we're looking at along this river valley is not noted in the rest of India's history. It's really odd. It just kind of is a blank spot. And then another part that we're going to be talking about is ancient China. Ancient China is really astounding. I'm going to state it in the video right now. If anybody wants extra credit, do a weekly reflection style report on the Jet Li movie, Hero. And that is a pseudo historical epic that took place during the Warring States period of China, which fits into the area that we're studying. So you could do a reflection on that movie, and you can talk about the costuming, you can talk about the filming, whatever aspects you want, but make sure that you do 250 words minimum, and the 4-step tools of artistic critique with a film, an image from the movie. All right. Has everybody got that? If you guys want extra credit.
Awesome. I already did my reflection for this week, but
All right, good. Now that doesn't replace the reflection for this week, but I want you to do it in the same style if you want extra
okay.
credit. And it's Jet Li's Hero, and I believe you can watch it for free with ads on YouTube. But anyway, if we look at this map of China, now this word Qin is pronounced Qin, and that is where we get the word China. The Chinese national identity, there are about at least 40 distinct ethnic groups that are linked together nationally under the banner of China because of everything that happened through the Warring States period, where Emperor Qin actually united all of China 2,200 years ago. It's almost 2,000 years ago. And there is some pretty amazing stuff. So the Shang Dynasty is, 3,500 to 3,000 years ago. The Zhou Dynasty is 3,000 years ago to about 2,300 years ago. The Qin Dynasty didn't last a super long time, but it is responsible for uniting China as a national identity. And then the Han Dynasty really built on what the Emperor Qin had done, and they lasted for about 400 years, 450 years. All right. And we're going to look at some of the stuff. A lot of the stuff that we're going to look at is in video, but I did add in some things that I want you guys to look at that are articles, static articles, so we can actually look at them together and just talk about a few things. Well, before we go on, I did want to praise everybody. I have seen steady improvement and really good work on the weekly reflections as well as the projects. And almost everybody, when I told them, hey, do this and this and this, and the project will be good, they turned around and did that and fixed it. There were a couple people that sent in videos that my computer was not smart enough to download, and I asked them to put them through a processing program to condense them so the memory was a lot smaller, and they did that, so resubmitted them, and they're great. The biggest problem that I've seen people doing, there were two. One was that they present something that should have been in a video format in a PDF format, and a lot of people turn around and fix that. And then the other one is that citations were either not in MLA format, they weren't alphabetically organized, or they didn't all have the accessed on dates. And what is really nice is as soon as I mention that to people, you guys would turn around, fix it, re-edit it, and resubmit it. And that's awesome. I love the responsiveness of you guys, and I've tried to go back and update the grade as quickly as possible so you can see your points. Now, Lindsay, Cassandra, and Zach, did any of the three of you have issues like that with your projects that you went and fixed and then I regraded it?
Yeah, I think we all saw mine last time.
Okay, all right, good, excellent. So hopefully you guys are happy now. Now, I included this. This is a link to a video. You guys should be seeing the screen that says Mohenjo-Daro and Harappan. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This first link I include there. A lot of this ancient stuff, I love putting links in there like this. Do not take them seriously. Ancient Aliens, I think, is so much fun for entertainment, and that's it. One thing I've noticed about them is they do not pay a lot of attention to
Facts.
historical context. Yeah, I know, Zach. They do not
Think
pay
that
attention, a
video-
lot of attention to historical context, and they do not pay a lot of attention to semiotics that we've all talked about, and they do not pay attention to the cultural visual language that provides context for a lot of what you're seeing. And in a later module, we'll be looking at Mesopotamian or Mesoamerican art. And there's a big critique that I have on ancient American, or ancient aliens videos on Mesoamerican art. And once you understand the visual language of what's going on with our ancestors, you can see that they just layer it with all these multiple religious meanings, spiritual meanings, very powerful messages that have nothing to do, sadly, with space travel and contact with extraterrestrials. So I know that is disappointing, but there it is. So whenever you guys see an Ancient Aliens video, know please that I'm just having fun. There is some weird stuff that they bring out that I think is fascinating, but if you do want to go more in depth of it, find out through the people that are actually doing verifiable academic work when they're paying attention to silly little nonsensical things like cultural context and reality. I'm sorry. For anybody who's a fan of Eric von Daniken, I am very sorry. I read all of his books too. All right, now what is really I want you guys watch these videos. I definitely, brief history, definitely watch that. I can't watch this with you because of, I haven't been able to figure out how to do that while recording. But definitely watch these videos, and the longer ones watch double time if you need to, but that'll give you a lot of history. What is fascinating about the Indus Valley civilizations, and the thing that seems to unite them, is that in many, many cultures, there are caches of weapons. Uh, there are what appear to be tombs of very high-ranking individuals that are filled with either imagery of warfare or with evidence of warfare, like with swords and things like that. And that seems to be a hallmark of a lot of ancient civilizations. A lot of ancient cities have things like temples and religious sites that seem to be built over tombs. A lot of the cities that have been um, explored by archaeologists in India for these Indus Valley civilizations, they don't seem to have that. Instead of caches of weapons, they have the finest network of working sewers that the world had seen until, for thousands of years. The Harappans had better sewers than anybody in the Western world did until about 150 years ago. So this is a culture that was active several thousand years ago that had beautiful working sewers. Another thing that they had, instead of great halls littered with all these imagery of people fighting each other and stuff like that, instead of having these huge temple complexes, they had big complexes for public swimming pools. They loved making public swimming pools a centerpiece of what they did. Romans did that too. The Japanese, other cultures did too. But what's fascinating is that the Harappans seem to put energy into the public swimming pools that they did not put in things that are recognized as temples. It doesn't seem like they had a lot of that. And it's just fascinating to me. The cities appear to be abandoned. There don't appear to be evidence of dramatic warfare cutting folks down. It just seems that, and it's not that they're mysterious abandonment. It seems like they just laid things down and walked away and went somewhere else. So a very interesting culture that people are still learning about. And I think a lot of really good scholarship and study has been going on with this, of post-colonial scholars in India that are born and raised in India doing a lot of work for their own history. And I think that's beautiful to see. A lot of the times, and a lot of cultures that we are touching on, the people that learn about it, or the people that build the original textbooks, were a lot of the times they were good scientists, but some of the times they weren't necessarily good scientists, but they were people that were wealthy and leisure class citizens of colonizing forces. So, for example, a lot of the early textbooks on Indian history were written by people that were part of the British colonization. This is the same true of Egyptian history. A lot of that stuff was written in the 19th century by Britons. A lot of the Mesoamerican history was written by Spanish monks. So it's what I love to see now. We are finally at an era where the people descended from those folks are writing their own histories using the tools of scientific inquiry that the West is forced to acknowledge. And I love seeing that. So I want to show you some of the artwork. And I think what is fast, I want you to watch these videos as well, but we're going to look at imagery of some of the artwork. So I'm just going to open some of these, and then we'll go back and look at them individually. So You should be seeing the Smart History page. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now what we're looking at is another map of the same area. So this is India right through here, Pakistan right through here, and we have Afghanistan up here. Okay. So y'all know where we're at. And these two cities are not the only cities. There's been about 50 cities so far that are identified as being part of this civilization, the Indus Valley civilization. And again, marked by incredibly clean sewer systems that are, some of them are still look like they could still be usable today, and marked by a lot of energy being put into public swimming pools, essentially, or bathhouses is what the archaeologists are calling them. So about 50 cities or so. There's probably more than that, but that seems to be about the right amount. And the reason why it's called Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilizations as well is because these are the earliest cities identified and most thoroughly mapped and cataloged. And that's pretty much it. So that's where the names come from. And what is really interesting, and this is fascinating to me too, when we get to Japan and look at the Jomon culture, I want you to go back and look at these. And if anybody wants to do a project where they compare the Indus Valley figurines with the Cycladic idols and the Jomon culture figurines, I'd love to see that. That'd be truly awesome. Because some of these look to me, without having a lot of information on where they're found, inside of the structures, they look to me like they could possibly be dolls, very much like the Cycladic figurines, or they could also might be votary figures like the Venus figures that we looked at. And it would be fascinating to see what you think of when you find out where they're actually discovered. So this is we're looking at stuff that is about 4,000 years old.
Can I comment on the
Sure.
goddess figurine?
Right here.
So, yes, that's what I did my project for this week on, and there are several of these figurines that are found that were used to burn oil or some sort of like plant matter or essences. So they kind of believe they were used in like ritualistic manners. Because if you look at some of them, the like smoke would come out of the stomach or come out of the ears or
Oh, that is very cool. Because that makes me think of too the Mississippi River Valley culture that we're going to look at towards the end. Um, that culture goes back about 2,000 years, and they did a lot of like lamps and vessels that were in the shape of people and animals, so that the smoke would come out of the mouth and stuff like that. That's really fascinating.
I thought it
That's very
was.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, consistent, there's something that seems to be really consistent to me a lot of the times. I look at these faces, look at the mouth, the nose, and the eyes, and then look at these faces: mouth, nose, and eyes, mouth, nose, and eyes, mouth, nose, and eyes. It seems to me that it's more important for you to identify this as a face than it is for it to be anatomically accurate. And it seems to me, for me, this feels kind of friendly, which I think is really interesting because we look at these things. This one is a little bit, this looks like it could be smoke coming out of the eyes or something like that. But a lot of these figures feel to me that they're not intended to intimidate, but they're intended more to be something that you connect with. And I like, and it could just be uh, projection on my part, but I do think it's really interesting. My thought is, I don't know if you guys ever seen Babylon 5, the TV series. One of the alien races looked very humanistic, but their hairdos always made these horizontal fans coming off the back of their heads. And I wonder if this is part of this, the cultural hairdos that a lot of people from this area had too, maybe. But I think it might be interesting. Maybe it was, maybe this is a male figure and this is another kind of hairdo, you know? I don't know, it'd be very interesting, but I could very much see that maybe this represents a person wearing a turban or having their hair like that. And it feels to me like something like this may be something that a parent gets for their kids. You know, there's a craftsman that makes toys and, you know, with actual working wheels and stuff like that. It feels to me like this could easily be something for a toy set. I don't know, but it seems like that. One thing that is really fascinating to me too is that there have been thousands of these kind of small tablets. These tablets are anywhere from the size of a quarter to a folded over dollar bill. You know, so not very big. So maybe that big. And even though a lot of them have been found, a lot of them have been found with these things that seem to be symbolic of animals and verging on the edge of perhaps language, but there hasn't been found something consistent or a large enough selection of them to date, where people can identify enough commonality among marks to identify any sort of written language. And I think it's just really that is a really fascinating conundrum. And so so a lot of that stuff that we looked at was from Harappa, but you can see that this is another example of a seal where it looks like to me there's a person sitting on a throne and there's animals facing him, but there doesn't seem to be an identifiable language. And then this dancing girl is one of my favorite pieces of art that survives from Mohenjo-daro. And then this priest king sculpture, called that just because it looks so serene. And now I've gone to the Met site. Can you guys see this? The Met site?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Here we have another animal figurine. But then we have this is another one of these seals that you see from Mohenjo-daro and Harappan. It's fascinating to me because there seems to be something going on. This reminds me of the kind of uh, hieroglyphic type stuff you see in Egyptian writing. But again, there isn't enough of a visual library for people to make sense of what it is. And I love these bowls. A lot of these bowls are pinch pots, but some of them feel like they're almost done on a wheel. Almost. I don't know how many of them are done on a wheel, but what does the difference between a pinch pot and something being thrown on a wheel tell you about? What are some of the things that could possibly tell you about a culture? If something is thrown on a wheel as opposed to being made as a pinch pot. Well, I'll walk you through that. We talk a little bit about semiotics, and this is something else where we're talking about implied cultural relativity or cultural importance. What is fascinating to me is a pot that is a pinch pot or a coil pot can be made with just the potter and the clay. But if this is thrown, where it's thrown on a wheel, that means that that person has to have the technology to spin a wheel for a sustained period of time. Now, when we go over and look at some of the stuff over in Mali, but in the Ife Kingdom, we'll see that people did make potter's wheels that were essentially like flat topped tops that they would spin really fast and then throw their pot and then continually spin it by hand while they're throwing it. And other people did make a mechanism. But what that tells us is that when somebody is making pottery, they can stay in an area long enough to create a fire, create the clay, shape the clay and clarify it, and then fire it for up to a week or 2 weeks at a time. So, you have a certain amount of cultural stability. It also tells us that there is a certain value given to the potter. We talked about this in previous classes as well, like when we were looking at the Ishtar Gate, we talked about this. And then when you start going into greater technology like potter's wheels and things like that, you realize that this culture is really valuing uh, both the technology. Well, among the things they're valuing are the technology, the skill level, the craftsmanship, the person who holds the knowledge for that craftsmanship, the person who holds the knowledge for the technology. And it is evidence of a culture that knows how to keep its craftspeople safe and fed and taken care of. Just like when we looked at Mesopotamia. And I think that that's fascinating. And when we see stuff like this, these things are tiny, like I said, and it looks like there it is. Something like this is a stamped seal, which implies two different technologies. One is an awareness of what clay can do, and that clay can take really tight detail, and you can fire it, and you can do something with it. And then the other technology it implies is the ability to carve a stamp so that you can replicate something. This is the initiation of what the kind of thinking that leads to things like printing presses or mass production. Here's another evidence of a stamp. So it's just some very cool stuff. And these kinds of designs that are not necessarily linked to any sort of message or any sort of thing other than just making it pretty lets me know that people in the culture valued things that look nice, which I think is very cool. See that for the first time showing up in the really ancient scrimshaw work from about 20,000 years ago, where our ancestors living in snow and ice took the time to make absolutely gorgeous works of art by scribing into bone, which tells us that they lived in an area where the community could take care of people long enough for them to really make beautiful artwork, and that they valued it as a community. I think that when I find stuff like that, it gives me hope for humans in general. Okay, now here, I actually know these people. The Barakat Gallery, they have a beautiful, this is what we're looking, can everybody see this? The Barakat Gallery and the Indus Valley artifacts?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can see it.
Okay. These are each really beautiful images. And, go through, look at a couple of them tightly. Like I love this vase that looks like it has different scenes on it from pastoral life. They just a beautiful vase. And then we also get things like this appears to be something that could be like a lamp or maybe even a candle holder. And you can recognize some of these animals today are still, their descendants are still in the area today, helping out families. And then we have some people here too. This is really fascinating. It's called Fertility Goddess, and it may or may not be. It might be because, but what's interesting to me is that the features are very similar to some of those Venus figurines that we saw that are, tens of thousands of years older. So very interesting. This looks to me like it could be an anteater. And I love figures like this, abstracted human forms, where I think it kind of verges away from being a doll. It seems like it's meant for something else. And here we do see some weaponry. What's fascinating to me is without a lot of caches of weapons, I wonder how much of this is meant for hunting instead of like tribal warfare. Or other things like that. It's just really, really fascinating to me. So definitely take the time to go through and look at this stuff. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pass on. I wanted to go over this really quickly. Some of the questions as you go through these things, just think about what could these artifacts tell us about what's important to the Harappans or, the Indus Valley people. And what's interesting, ask yourself some of these questions as you look at the stuff. What makes it such a big mystery is that they don't seem to be a part of this vast historical record that goes back thousands of years, that the rest of India has been keeping. They seem to be, they were there for centuries and then just kind of walked away and joined other communities. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of written history about them, which is makes it even more fascinating to me. Now we talked about Septimius Severus. Remember, he was the Rome's African emperor. He was born in. His wife was from Syria. He was born in Libya. And we talked about colors and different things like that. The only colors that seem to survive on the pottery and stuff are the red and black pigments because they are part of the clay. And I don't know if people painted things with anything else that wore off. I kind of have a tendency to doubt it, but it does make me wonder, the things that we're looking at are only solid color remnants. So I wonder what other colors they have on them. Now, the dancing girl, I really want you to watch this video. This is the dancing girl. And I love her because she reminds me of my youngest, just full of sass. I mean, look at that, how that arm is. She she looks like somebody who would stand up for her little brother and beat the snot out of you, but also whine because you're not letting her go to the dance she wants to. You know, she has her way. She knows that her way around a crowd, and I don't know. I know I'm projecting a lot on her, but I just love this figure. And it's not a very big figure. It's under a foot tall, but it's done by Lost Wax Casting. And so there's a foundry tour that you can watch if you want, but definitely look at this Victorian Albert video of how Lost Wax casting was done. And there is evidence of this of a lot from a lot of ancient civilizations. Essentially, people would make a principal figure out of wax. They would pack it with a clay. They would fire the clay, and in the process of firing the clay, melt the wax out. Then they would turn that same thing upside down, put it in a fire pit, heat it up, and pour molten metal into it. And then either break the mold off or separate it. Romans were really good at making reproducible casts. And a lot of the times, how you would do that is you would cast the wax part over and over again, and then make molds for each of those wax heroes, and then pour the molten bronze into it. And so definitely look at that lost wax bronze casting, and because we are going to see that in other cultures too. Among them, the Han were really brilliant experts at this, as well as the Shang really did some amazing work. And then one of the other cultures we're going to look at is the Ife Kingdom cultures. Yoruba bronzes are some of the most astounding in the world. Absolutely photorealistic bronze casting done over 1,000 years before the Renaissance. Really amazing stuff. So now we're going over to China. Absolutely no transition at all, but the Harappan civilization, Indus Valley, is over here, and now we're sidestepping the Himalayas, going north of them into China, this whole area. The dynasties that we're going to look at, the oldest one is Shang. Then there's the Zhou, which is expanded a little bit. Qin, which is credited as working very hard to unite all of China. And then the Han. This 2,000 years of Chinese history is really good. Again, watch it at double speed or whatever, so you can still kind of understand what's going on, but definitely take a moment to watch it. Before the Shang dynasty was a dynasty called Xia. And this dynasty goes back 10,000 years before this, but it's believed by many, even though there are a lot of written records of the Xia dynasty, it talks a lot about emperors who were gods. And so people believe that this is firmly in the realm of folklore. But some of the things I love about it in the Xia dynasty, one of the famous heroes is a guy named Yu, the engineer. You know, he was an emperor. That's what he was known for, because he was a brilliant guy, knew a lot of math, and could build anything. And I love that that's the kind of person who's celebrated. Just like King Charles of Prague is a king from about 450 years ago, who has he has a big equestrian bronze of him in the central Prague square, and he is remembered because he brought publicly funded education to the country. You know, and that's what his equestrian statue commemorates. So he's King Charles the Educator, and I love that when cultures celebrate uh, achievements like that. So definitely watch this video as well. And you know, it says history of the Shah dynasty. It is, like I said, it's considered to be in the realm of folklore because it takes place. The historical dynasties, when we talk about the separation from prehistory and history, the biggest separation is any sort of written record, and that's essentially what it is. And I don't really like that too much, because some cultures did not develop a written record, but their verbal record remained consistent for centuries, if not millennia. Like, for example, the original Australians. They have a verbal record that is kept in their verbal record astronomical events going back tens of thousands of years. The griots of Central Africa, same thing. People memorized hundreds and hundreds of years of history and would perform it. You know, if you're a fully trained griot, at any point you could be asked to recite any moment of history and you'd be required to recite it, and it would always be the exact same. But since the Shang, there does seem to be consistent written records dating back, you know, as evidence of that, then they're considered to be the first historically supported dynasty. Excuse me. Now, the Shang dynasty has a lot of beautiful stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and see if we can, if you guys can see this. We probably can't play the actual video, but can you guys see the Shang dynasty ewer, the metalwork?
Yeah, the image.
Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna try to just go through. Okay. So I don't know if you guys heard any of that. It seems sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just consistently does not seem to work when I try to record it for the class. But this is a ewer, which is just a fancy way for fancy word for um, oh, and of course the regular word a pitcher. It's a pitcher. It's a pitcher that holds water or oil or things like that. Typically, ewer is the word that is used for a pitcher that seems to be used for ceremonial purpose. And what's beautiful about this particular one is, first, this thing is like 3,000 years old. All right. But what is really beautiful about it is that it is so much detail. And this is incredibly ancient. It is made out of bronze, which is a fusion of copper, tin, and lead. And a lot of bronze today doesn't have a lot of lead in it. But what is really fascinating about this is it is so ancient, and you can still see all this detail. These guys knew what they were doing. And if you ever cast with bronze, the bronze, depending on the particular alloy, can shrink anywhere from 0.5% to 5%, which means that it'll pull away a little bit from the mold, but also in some areas it may pull a lot away from the mold, and it can destroy the casting if you don't know what you're doing. And so a lot of these castings, the fact that they can get all this detail in there shows they really understand the casting technology. And you can see that it's an animal shape with these horns. Maybe there's a ram form to it, but you can also see other animals like fish and cats, wild cats and different things like that put into this. So it's a fantastical piece. And I love stuff like this because it could be an expression of what are the totem animals important to the family that this is for? What do these animals represent? Protection? Do they represent other things? Like one of the elements in many traditional Asian cultures is a fish, a particular fish called a carp. And there are monasteries that will have fish in ponds that are legendary because there's no record of any of these carp actually dying in captivity of natural causes. It seems to be that the carp is a symbol of longevity. And koi are in a lot of these sacred pools because koi are direct descendants of carp, and they represent the longevity, and good health. So that a lot of the times, maybe that's what it's symbolizing when you see a fish there. And cats represent intelligence and the ability to hunt, different things like that. So there's lots of ideas of that. And it's interesting that this would have what appears to be predatory teeth in the body of a ram, which is an ungulate, an herbivore. So what is that saying? Maybe it's a combination of ideas of rams appear to be symbols for strength and protectiveness. And maybe this is also saying, don't mess with me. So it would be really interesting to see what all these things have to come together to mean. And then we also talk about oracle bones. And I'm going to, again, we're not going to watch the video, but oracle bones are something that were very common in the Shang Dynasty. And they move forward. They are things that in some villages are still being used today. But an oracle bone would be a large flat bone, generally like a scapula or shoulder blade of an animal. Like oxen are really common for these kinds of things. And they would be inscribed with symbols that represent prayers, for example, entreaties to spirits, gods, ancestors, different things like that. And what makes them oracle bones is that the shaman that really knows how to use this, these shamanist men and women would heat up something in the fire and then press it against the bone or start drawing on the bone, and how the bone cracked or responded to this source of heat would give an opportunity for the shaman to look at it and scry some meaning from these cracks and be able to articulate either an answer to an entreaty or some aspect about future resonance of choices that are being considered. So it's basically a scrying device for seeing into a realm beyond immediate human temporal perspective. Really fascinating stuff. And then we're looking at Han Dynasty work. Okay. Jet Li, my mom, when she was alive, she was another one of her heroes. And I mentioned Denzel Washington was somebody that she really was enamored of. Jet Li too. She thought he was awesome. But this gives you a little bit of a history leading up to the Han Dynasty, particularly the Qin aspect of that lead up. China is named today because of the Qin dynasty. Emperor Qin united all of the identities that came in to create what we recognize today as China. And definitely watch as many of these as you can about this, because it gives you some really fascinating history behind it. What is really interesting to me is that the terracotta warriors, there is evidence as we go back in time that when people of power or influence were buried, what is really fascinating to me in a very sad way, let's see if I can get, okay, is that a lot of the times servants and livestock were killed to be buried with these people of means to kind of serve them in the afterlife and protect them in the afterlife. What is really amazing about Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum is that all these human figures, their life-size human figures, were made out of clay rather than having armies slaughtered to protect him. And I think that shows an awareness on some level of value of, associated with human life. Now, there is evidence also that families would be wiped out if you didn't fulfill a quota for the bolting mechanism for the crossbows that you were told to make. So it's not by any means a kind view of what we would consider today a kind view of of the ruling responsibilities of the time. But it is interesting to me that instead of killing people, he chose to be buried with terracotta warriors. What's also interesting is that even though these are mass produced, every single one is unique. Every single one of the 8,000 terracotta warriors is unique. And they're not just humans, they're also horses, livestock made out of terracotta, chariots, weapons made out of terracotta. And you can see this is just one area where that has been excavated. There's others that haven't been still, that they're guessing there might be thousands more. So definitely go through this and look at, but this is one of the chariots I'm talking about, all made out of terracotta, all made out of fired clay. I think the wheels might be wood, but the horses are all unique and they're all made out of clay. All the people are made out of clay. It's just really fascinating to see all this work done into for the tomb of this celebrated emperor. But people really get a good idea of what the costuming was like for the time, what the armor looked like. Are you guys seeing the Smithsonian website?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good, because I would have felt really stupid. So Qin Shi Huang is the guy that is, that dynasty, the Qin dynasty, is the one that is credited of uniting China and giving it its cultural identity as China. So it's just some very, very cool stuff. I do not know if they were painted. I don't know if anybody has done an in-depth study about them being painted. My suspicion is probably not, for a number of reasons, but very interesting. Would be a good video to watch as well. This is a TED Talk that talks about the terracotta warriors. I remember, as artists, we call it terracotta instead of clay. Terracotta is the artsy fartsy hoity toity word that means clay. So it's a way to validate your university degree. So definitely check out more of this kind of stuff. And I want to see, you know, a lot of this stuff is going to be videos. I do really want to again, I want you to watch this. I love the smart history videos, but I don't think, I'm sorry, I don't think that we're going to be able, it's not, the whole thing is not going to be translated into um, a format that we can save. Now, again, we're looking, if we look at Han Dynasty is 200 BC to 200 AD. So a little bit over 400 years. And the level of detail in this, if we look at this, and then we look at this, that is, you know, maybe almost 1,000 years older, it is really amazing to me what this tells me when I see this kind of level of detail and craftsmanship is that there is some sort of transmission from artist to artist, from guild member to guild member, where these technologies are staying alive. And or maybe they're rediscovered by truly brilliant people very quickly and then re-explored. But it would be less of a surprise to me that there are these guilds, there are these families that keep these technologies alive and pass these secrets on to the next dynasty's craftspeople. I just, it's absolutely amazing stuff. And there's a short video here about how ancient Chinese bronzes were created. I think this is one of the ones that I have you guys look at as well. Just absolutely fascinating stuff. So there's artwork from each of these dynasties that is really amazing. If you look at the detail on this, the measurements of this is, we're probably talking maybe a millimeter for this. Maybe this is a centimeter tall figure. So we are talking tiny detail. And I want you to look at the geometric precision of the craftsmanship. That is astounding to me because these people, as they are carving into the clay or into the wax to make this mold, the craftspeople are incredibly precise. It's astonishing precision for me. When you consider that all these look visually to be identical shapes, the craftsperson had to look at the mirror overall and figure out a way to divide this incredibly evenly so that their design could be consistent throughout. That kind of thought for me is pretty mind-blowing. And it demonstrates that these people really knew what they were doing. You know, the accuracy of these forms like the square and the circle, the consistency of craftsmanship throughout the entire piece. You know, I can really respect craftsmanship when people are doing organic forms and animal shapes and things like that. When you start getting into the geometry and you're this precise, that communicates a whole new level of precise thought and precise planning that goes into something like this. This person really had to know what they were doing. Are you guys catching any of this? Or not catching? Do you guys, you guys appreciate what I'm talking about? Why geometric precision and accuracy might be a different level of technological capacity beyond like organic imagery?
Yes, because it seems like just a few, I don't know, hundreds of years earlier, they were drawing on caves with paint. So to do something within precise geometry seems like math mixed with craftsmanship.
Yeah, yeah. It really demonstrates a very solid understanding of math. And what is fascinating to me too is we can start dissecting this and look at areas like this and see ratios like the golden section showing up too. We can see an awareness of these kinds of forms consistent across cultures, which is really interesting to me. I do not know if that demonstrates any sort of connection between cultures, other than it does demonstrate to me that human beings like finding ways to express themselves using the same kind of math that we all use. So humans across the world are recognizing the same kind of ratios in the nature that they look at, and people fall on math over and over again and geometry over and over again to demonstrate some of these same ideas of expression. And I just think stuff like that is absolutely fascinating. But you look at this, does it surprise you that this is based on handwork technology? Is this
Yes.
almost, what's that?
Yes, it seems like it'd be hard to replicate with a chisel and a hammer.
Yeah. This is pretty astounding to me. These guys knew what they were doing. There's no doubt about it. So this gets us a little bit more into the art of the Han Dynasty. And some of this stuff is really amazing. And this is when you start doing your weekly reflections on this stuff, do a little bit of research as to the material qualities. What's the importance of the materials that are being used? We don't know an awful lot about that from the Indus Valley because there isn't a lot of records, but we can kind of surmise a little bit more about different symbolism of materials from China, these different dynasties in China, simply because it seems like the records kind of roll over a little bit. Like, for example, jade is a sacred material. It's there are qualities to jade where it's always cold to the touch. It's very hard to work. The colors don't fade with true jade. And there's green, there's white, and there's yellow jade. And it seems to be associated with this aspect of divinity. So with those kind of qualities, having a suit made out of interlocked jade pieces, what do you surmise this might possibly mean that the people are trying to express over the body of whoever was buried in this jade suit? What do you think they might be trying to do with this body?
I'm sorry, I kind of missed part of that, but could it be protection or some sort of like spiritual protection, I guess?
Yeah,
I was gonna
absolutely.
say similar, where it's less of a
Yeah.
protection from kind of the elements, but more protection of the spiritual side of things.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Knowing that jade is a sacred material and this person is mummified with a suit of jade around them, it seems that it would be perfectly appropriate to surmise that this is a way of protecting this person. Maybe even hoping that their body and soul lives on forever. The jade itself seems to form a very similar function as to the prayers and the tokens that were wrapped in the mummy wrappings by the people that would embalm Egyptian mummies. It's a way of preserving the body and the spirit forever. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. And since jade is a sacred material, that this is probably going to be the body of somebody who is very well respected, if not of a person who is almost revered to be sacred in and of themselves, like somebody of divine mandate. And that's something that I should touch on as well, because in the videos you also learn about this belief that seems consistent from dynasty to dynasty, that really was articulated during the Han Dynasty of the divine mandate of kings. And this shows up in many cultures over and over again, this idea that somehow the king is an embodiment of, or the rulers are an embodiment of some sort of aspect of divinity. Pharaoh in Egyptian literally translates to God among us or God with us. A word that you might be more familiar with that is closer to Western traditions is Emmanuel. It's essentially the same word. This idea that the emperor or the ruler is a crystallized God, a God in human form. And in the Han Dynasty, it was written about an awful lot with this idea that the emperor was the emperor because that's who it embodied the divine. The body of the emperor embodied the divine, and that empresses would stress as well that it was embodying the divine feminine in the body of the empress, which means that their decree cannot be altered. Their decrees cannot be fought against because it's essentially the will of God, And if God is pleased with them, they are in power. Or if the gods or if the divine is pleased with them, they remain in power. And when they break that mandate, when they go against the will of the gods, that's when they die. That's when they're overtaken. That's when they're overpowered. So on one hand, this idea of divine mandate protects the body and announcements and decisions of the ruler, but it also justifies, in hindsight, if you can get away with it, it justifies the overthrow of a ruler. Because if God really wanted them to stay there, they wouldn't have been overthrown by anybody. So this divine mandate of kings is kind of a double-edged, it can be either a weapon or a protector. But this also talks about scroll figures and paintings and different things like that. And again, you do hit traditional Chinese brush painting is based on Confucian style, and it's the real traditional stuff is only black on white, but you do see at other periods of time other colors like blue and red, and a lot of that will fade out over time. Silk was medium a substrate that was used quite a bit because silk is incredibly valuable, and they would use that quite a bit as the basis for the paintings. And you see at different periods through Chinese history that you have the canon of human form where bodies are distorted slightly or sometimes at a greater amount to fit into the canon of human form to express the cultural values. And this is some of these paintings, you'll see some features are extolled and others are downplayed. Different costume styles or different clothing styles are celebrated, while others not so much. And we talk a bit about sculpture as well. Some periods, the sculpture was very naturalistic. Others, it was very stylized. Just like we looked at the Indus Valley stuff, a lot of those animals are very stylized. Some of them, you could identify the species, from the toys. So definitely take the time to go through this and look at some of these different things and guess as to what they represented. And I think this ties back to, I think it was Lindsay, you were talking about some of those figures being used to maybe for incense or maybe to burn particular materials. This is a bronze lamp that is gilded, which means gold is layered onto it or hammered in. One of the things that makes gold such an amazing metal to work with is that it is almost infinitely malleable. Many other metals will, when you start, you can definitely hammer them out quite a bit, but metals like steel will, if you don't do it properly, can shiver and break. You can accidentally crystallize it while you're hammering it and make it so that it becomes more brittle. Gold, it's very difficult to do that. And so you can hammer a sheet of gold theoretically down so that it's only a few molecules thick. But so gold is, and there's even evidence of like Mesopotamian cultures creating batteries to electroplate using gold, which I think is fascinating. So this is a bronze lamp that gold was very layered over, and that's what's called gilt. And it says farm model. I don't know how much of these are models and how much of them are actually toys. It wouldn't surprise me if they were toys, some of them. But definitely go through and look at some of this stuff. It's absolutely amazing. Spend time exploring as many of those videos as you can that I've linked to, because you'll see some amazing stuff. Definitely look at this Chinese landscape painting. I made friends with a contemporary master of traditional Confucian style painting, and really very cool stuff. We're going to skip that. And I don't know how much of this video, again, we can see, but this person is just working with black ink. And what's amazing to me is that a real, a really accomplished Confucian style ink painting master can imply several different colors. They don't, traditional Confucian style painting only uses black, like I said, but the way that they apply it in such a way so that your mind starts thinking, oh, it must be blue there, or it must be orange there, or different things like that. And your brain starts playing with you in assuming colors where they aren't. And I think that is just fascinating. And what is really interesting to me, talking to some of these Confucian masters, the ancient traditions talk about art in a very similar way to how Plato described it. When we talk about Greek art, have you guys heard the phrase "art imitates nature"?
Yes.
Yeah, that is a it's not a misquotation because that is an actual quote from Plato, and I think it was from his Timaeus or Phaedo. I think he may have talked about it in both. But that implies that the only really good art is art that is realistic. The problem is the quote before that is that nature is a manifestation of the divine and art imitates nature. So the implication there, when you look at the full quote, is that if art imitates nature and nature is the manifestation of the divine or the divine will, then art should be a manifestation of the divine will as worked through the artist. So the artist creates art when he or she is creating while working under or working in connection with the divine will, or as Albrecht Dürer called it later, inspiration, spiritus, something beyond the ordinary self. And which puts a whole different spin on it, which tells us that Plato is talking about art as a celebration of spirituality and cultural relevance, cultural connection. So art doesn't have to just represent nature in order to be beautiful, which I think is kind of cool. One of the things that makes Confucian art painting so amazing is that there are only a set number of brushstrokes that an artist can use, but they can use that in any different size and any different combination. But there's only, like I said, there's only a set number of brushstrokes. So a person can do an entire fantastic landscape using only a few different brushstrokes and stuff, being very conscious of how they do that with only one color and produce something that is absolutely gorgeous. And Plato also talks about art being an idealization of what an artist can see, and that artwork should be a celebration of the best, or what could potentially be the best. And we see that in traditional Chinese Confucian painting as well. It's you see the idealized landscape, you see the idealized person, because they're trying to celebrate the very best of potential things that could happen. Anyway, so go through the stuff, watch as many of the videos as you can, and look at some of this other amazing art that we've come across. Any last observations or questions before we separate this week?
No, just thank you for your time.
All right, well,
Yeah,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much for being with me and being part of our class today. I really appreciate it when you guys show up and are part of things. Thank you very much.
Thank you for showing us cool stuff. Have a good night.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. Have a safe weekend. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, we'll see you.